Thank you very much for inviting us and giving us the chance to talk about one of the current human rights crises that, especially in Europe, most people are not even aware of in detail at all, even though what some people might not know as well, 7 European countries have close diplomatic relations to the DPRK. We came with our NGO just by chance to the issue to deal with North Korean human rights at all. When I was confronted with the issue 5 years ago, I had no idea what's going on in North Korea. Maybe I could just have known where North Korea is located on the map and know that there's some kind of dictatorship in place. And this was the basic knowledge I think most people in Europe had 5 years ago. When we learned what's actually going on in North Korea, we decided with a small group of human rights activists like myself to immediately trying to find a way to work on this issue. And there we come to the biggest problem we might have in Europe when we are talking about North Korea. When we try to gather more information what is going on in the DPRK, we found some people who gave presentations, lectures, we found books published about the situation, but actually none of this was kind of making sense compared to other sources. So when we started to build up a small NGO, which is luckily growing by now a little bit, we found it most important to find a way to evaluate information from the DPRK and about the DPRK. So this is one of the basic things we are doing today. And we consider it might be the first step to find in the future at any point at all a solution how to improve the human rights situation in North Korea. So let me quickly explain, before I will describe what kind of human rights relations we are talking about, what this issue I just explained to you means. So we have 2 ways how to gather information from North Korea. The first way is what most people in Europe who deal with the DPRK are doing. They are traveling, invited by the regime, to North Korea and try to evaluate data and to describe here what they can actually see when they visit the DPRK. Nobody visiting the DPRK is allowed to move around freely without being guided by, well, just assume what kind of people will be around you all the time. You're not even allowed to leave the hotel alone. And what they experience leads to impressions like there's a lot of positive development in North Korea regarding human rights. There's more and more wealth in the population, and this is partly true. The upper class in North Korea actually develops quite good if it comes to the issue of food shortage. The rich people in North Korea don't have that problem anymore. North Korea developed a tablet PC, a smartphone that is spread among the probably highest elite in North Korea. We're talking about probably 1 million people who own such devices, even though there's no Wi-Fi in North Korea. So these kind of impressions is what you get when you visit North Korea being invited. The other source of information we found, and we consider to be more valuable, is to talk to North Korean people. Of course, you can't talk to North Koreans inside North Korea without putting them in danger, because criticizing the regime in any way will lead probably for 3 generations of your family to be imprisoned or even killed. But we have more than 31,000 North Koreans who successfully escaped North Korea and live in South Korea today. Now, there is a discussion by scientists who research about North Korea if this is a trustful source. And I think most people might agree if you ask one victim of violence, for example, about his experience, that this might be not a very objective report you will get, probably. But if you evaluate the testimonies of more than 30,000 people, it is kind of really naive to think you will not get out really valuable information. But this is nothing that organizations, science organizations or NGOs in Europe do by now. So we think this is the most important thing. What these refugees and defectors actually tell about North Korea, about the ideology, the human rights record, food situation, malnutrition, and indoctrination even of children with the state ideology, is actually the opposite in most cases, what scientists tell who visit North Korea to get information there. And this is what we see the biggest problem. Because if we want to find a solution to improve human rights in North Korea, we need to, firstly, of course, understand what is going on there. And therefore, we need really precise information. So, 2014, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on North Korea published a report, 400 pages, nearly 100 defectors were interviewed for that. And this was, by the words of the Commission of Inquiry, the most tragic report on human rights the United Nations ever published. It includes camps for political prisoners, probably 120,000 people inside at the current time. It includes the killing of everybody who is in any way religious. It includes the guilt by association for 3 generations of people if somebody even criticizes the regime or criticizes things as food shortage. And this is actually what most North Korean defectors confirm. Whoever we go speak to about North Korea who live there will confirm these kind of problems in different ways of experience. Why the experiences are different from person to person is basically touching another very interesting issue, which is that whenever you read a newspaper article, you see a documentary about the DPRK, you will find the line in the beginning, the last communist state on earth. North Korea, if you look at the political agenda, if you look at the ideology, is in no way a communist state, not even close. You have a class system with 52 classes of people, and you are born into this class. There's no movement to get into an upper class, nearly no opportunity. And just to summarize this issue, you could have like a 2-day discussion about if North Korea is communist or not, but I just, by this class system, want to show you that it's not. It's one of the mistakes most people make. You see that the most ideas we have about North Korea are not actually true. The only people who can tell us what's really going on are the North Korean people. So what we are missing internationally, I think, is really scientific research, talking to these kind of persons who experienced inside North Korea all kind of situations, of jobs. They lived all over the country, in every province. So we have sources of information from all defectors, about the defectors, about nearly every aspect of the North Korean life. There's one problem with that. We don't have actually information from today. If you want to leave the DPRK, you need to go through whole China, which will repatriate defectors normally back to North Korea if they get them. So refugees take sometimes 1.5, or even 2 years to escape to, for example, South Korea or other countries, even in Europe. We have a few North Korean defectors who made their way up to Europe. So because of that time, if you speak to defectors, you can know what was happening in North Korea 1 year ago or 2 years ago. But still, this kind of information is much, much more precise than if you just get like what I call kind of regime-guided science in North Korea. Because the regime is quite well known to be not like a regime run by a crazy leader, as often is called, or be irrational. It is highly irrational, and the main interest of North Korea is to stay as it is. This is actually, if you understand that situation, a lot of actions from North Korea make a lot of sense, and you can get why they are behaving like this, why there's threats to the United States, for example, why they are developing nuclear weapons and ICBMs. It is to make sure the regime can stay as it is. And one of the most important things for the regime to do is to be accepted by the international community, therefore. This is really an issue North Korea and the leaders of North Korea are concerned about. So when we discovered that a lot of European countries have diplomatic relations, exchange programs for students, for example, we considered European countries should get much more engaged into trying to change the DPRK into actually accepting human rights. Sorry, one question, how much time do I have left? Just about. Oh, perfect, okay. Thank you. So if I have 10 minutes left, let me just explain two more issues, a little bit more detailed. The first one that is really important to learn about and to understand the DPRK is the ideology of North Korea. So everybody who researches about North Korea will quickly find there's an ideology called Juche ideology, which is written by Kim Il-sung within, I don't know, 1,000 something books in his lifetime. And this ideology is published in, by the way, actually all languages we have on this planet by North Korea itself. So you can just read it. If you read this, you are basically wasting time, to be true, because this ideology is kind of sounding like a very philosophical concept about becoming a totally independent state, but it is not really connected to the reality in North Korea. You have kind of a second ideology in the DPRK that is not really written down. And this includes a personality cult about the Kim dynasty, you know, the state founder Kim Il-sung, the son Kim Jong-il, and now the current dictator Kim Jong-un. Everybody in North Korea is totally indoctrinated from early childhood to believe that those three leaders of North Korea are not actually really human beings, but godlike humans. And I met my first North Korean defector probably 4 years ago, a young man, probably 25 years old when I met him. And he was escaped North Korea probably 2 years before we met. And I had the chance to talk like 3 hours to him to learn about North Korea. He explained a lot of very interesting details to me, but there's one thing that sticks in my mind today. He told me he knows that the regime did a lot of harm to his whole biography. He was suffered from malnutrition. He was indoctrinated with the ideology. He had to thank the dear leader, so-called, for everything he got. And every time he had, it's actually similar to religion in some parts. He had to thank the pictures of the dear leader that are in every room for everything, every food, every glass of water, for everything. And he explained to me, when he left North Korea, he experienced and learned step by step that all this information he was raised with in school, even in kindergarten, are not true. But still, he told me, whenever he sees like a picture or video of Kim Jong-un, or Kim Jong-il at that time, sorry, he is still totally shaken. He can't get it out of his system. He was raised up to praise the leader of North Korea day by day, the whole day. And this can't be just be forgotten. If you take a child and indoctrinate it from the age of 2 years with such an ideology and such an effort, how North Korea does it, you have a huge problem. So to come to the second thing I would like to explain as example, to come to now science from South Korea. About Germany, this is a really interesting issue, because Germany was a divided country and the Korean Peninsula is divided today. A lot of scientists from South Korea thought, oh, this is the situation we can learn from, because Germany overcome this division and was reunited, what actually even North Koreans wish for, but in a way that most people wouldn't accept, of course, on the international level. To make this comparison is, of course, a good idea. There is a lot that you can learn from the history of Germany. But if you now consider this situation could be compared, it's, from my opinion, wrong. Because the situation, to start, how the two countries were divided, is so different by history that if you, for example, compare now the East German regime at GDR with North Korean DPRK today, you totally left any reality, because the systems are so different. The history, how the countries were divided, are so different that this makes no sense. But there's other lessons, especially from Second World War, that could be really, really interesting to prepare for reunification in Korea. So if when Germany was successfully when the Second World War ended and Germany was defeated by the United Forces, the United Forces had a huge problem. They had a country full of people, the Germans, who are highly indoctrinated with the ideology of the Nazi regime at that time. And they had now to make a new German state free of that ideology. So what they developed was the concept, first done in history as far as I could find in any research. They developed the concept of entnazification, which means there was a lot of effort to bring the ideology out of the people's mind, to make the German society, after being indoctrinated for so long, into a new democratic state. And this is an issue that I could find no research about, or no plan, or any concept that will be really, really important about North Korea. The indoctrination of the people there is much, much more intense, since it's lasting for 70 years now, than it has ever been in Nazi Germany. So if you raise up 3 generations with the same ideology, the North Koreans have no access, nearly no access to outside information at all. They are dependent to the information given by the state, and this is basically propaganda. You really have a problem if this system will at some point probably fail, break, whatever will happen, because a lot of the North Korean people will still have that ideology in mind. And to have a unification where a huge part of the population in North Korea still believes in that ideology, which includes things like the United States started the Korean War by attacking North Korea in the 50s. A lot of North Koreans today still believe that, most of them actually. And if you meet defectors from North Korea, they are really, really confused when they just left the country to learn that the whole rest of the world has a totally different history. North Korea is in these kind of things about their own history really absurd. They have another time than the rest of the world. They live in the year 112, I think, today, because the North Korean history starts with the birth of Kim Il-sung today, the leader, the founder of North Korea. Everything is totally different. So basically, I hope I could give you an impression that we really need more real research about North Korea, and we need to check the sources where we get the information. Visiting DPRK and just using information you get there while the regime is guiding and watching is actually no good idea to learn how North Korea is actually run and how the current situation there is. It is, I remind you from the beginning of my speech, by the United Nations Commission of Inquiry, the most gross human rights violation we have today, even though we have a lot of human rights problems on the whole planet. But the head of this Commission of Inquiry, Michael Kirby, he said that he is first very well aware of the German history and how sensitive the issue is, especially of the German concentration camps. But 5 camps in North Korea, prison camps for political prisoners, he calls concentration camps as well. He said it is the only name we can give to these camps. It is about, there's no gas chambers like we have in German concentration camps, but there's people who are killed, they are never released, they don't know why they are in these camps, and they are killed by starvation and really, really hard forced labor. And this situation is really, really unique in the world today, and we really need to do that. So to have a cultural dialogue to North Korea, to come to the name of our host today, is of course important. It is no use to just threaten North Korea. We need dialogue, but North Korea is very concerned about their image in the world. And this is something where we could probably have a dialogue at some points that they will improve human rights. Thank you for listening.